On September 20th, Azerbaijan, with the backing of Turkey and the literal employment of Libyan and Syrian jihadist mercenaries, launched military action against Nagorno-Karabakh, Artsakh. This aggression, now joined by Armenia's response, has continued and escalated these past few weeks, including through ceasefires called for by the United States, the European Union, the UN, NATO, Pope Francis, and many others, which were brokered but nonetheless broken. Like many others, I've been active to deepen my understanding of the current political and historical dimensions of this conflict. I've read countless articles, watched webinars, attended live stream panel discussions, and listened to voices of Armenian and non-Armenian intellectuals, peace activists, diplomats, artists, politicians, and scholars. I'm so very grateful for all of them, and I especially want to acknowledge and bring attention to Aris Janigian and Mark Arax's LA Times article, Why Armenians Everywhere Stand with Those in Nagorno-Karabakh, Chris Bojalian's Boston Globe article, Let Us Not Allow Another Aleppo in the Caucasus, David L. Phillips' Boston Globe article, Armenia-Azerbaijan Conflict is Spiraling Out of Control, Jean-Rees Bajalan, Sarah Noor Yildiz, and Vasken Khachik Davidian's What's Really Driving the Azerbaijan-Armenian Conflict, the International Armenian Literary Alliance's Don't Look Away literary series for Artsakh, the Harvard Armenian Law Association's hosted panel discussion Crisis in the Caucasus, Nagorno-Karabakh Under Siege, which featured U.S. Ambassador John Evans, former U.S. Ambassador John Evans, Professor David L. Phillips, Director of Columbia's Peace Building and Human Rights Program, and Professor Stephen Asaturian, Director of the Armenian Studies Program at UC Berkeley, for a panel discussion on the violence in Nagorno-Karabakh. Also for Columbia's Center for the Study of Social Difference, Women Mobilizing Memory Collective Solidarity Statement on Artsakh, and a joint letter signed by Gayatri Spivak, Tariq Ali, Viken Beberian, Noam Chomsky, Judith Herman, Cornel West, and Sela Ben Habib. My perspective truly has been enlarged and my understanding deepened. I've been touched, enriched, and inspired by their work. The following excerpts, some brief excerpts, most directly prompted this recording. Chris Bojalian wrote, Turkey has also resurrected the ghosts of 1915 and the Armenian genocide, the Ottoman Empire's systematic annihilation of 1.5 million of its Armenian citizens. Olivia Katranjian, in her the International Armenian Literary Association series, recounted Erdogan's recent promise, quote, we will continue to fulfill the mission of our grandfathers have carried out for centuries in the Caucasus. And also her report that, quote, Armenians fear this assault is a continuation of genocidal policies and an attack on our existence as a people. Janigian and Arax write, it was the forebears of these same Turks and Azeris who massacred 1.5 million Armenians living under Ottoman rule in the years 1915 to 1918. And to this day, they continued to deny the crime of genocide. This denial is not simply an erasure of history. It sets the stage for what Armenians now fear is an attempt to inflict a mortal wound to what is left of our homeland. Janigian and Arax too reflect on, quote, our obligation as exiles in the new land to make sure the old land and its people did not vanish into history. It is these excerpts most specifically that drew up in my mind two texts by the great 20th century Armenian-American writer and artist William Saroyan, neither of which are Saroyan's well-known, though inaccurately quoted, passage from his 1936 sketch, The Armenian and the Armenian, which will be a subject of a future recording. The second of these two Saroyan texts that came up to my mind is an essay entitled A New Idea in the World, and a future forthcoming recording on that is ahead. The first is a quote-unquote story called 70,000 Assyrians, published in Saroyan's critically and popularly acclaimed first collection of short stories in 1934, The Daring Young Man on the Flying Trapeze and Other Stories. It's a story that Saroyan, he himself describes within the story as, quote, a letter to a common people, telling them in a simple language what they already know. I offer the story in accord with the objectives of my YouTube channel, William Saroyan Special, Stories Read Aloud, hoping to introduce more to this truly remarkable writer, and also as a contribution to our own individual and collective inquiry into identity, the disappearance and active erasure of culture, and what it means to be human, especially as we face this current crisis. With his unique perspective and distinctive style, playful, simple, earnest, and profound, here is William Saroyan's 70,000 Assyrians. I hadn't had a haircut in 40 days and 40 nights, and I was beginning to look like an intellectual. You know the look, genius gone to pot and ready to join the Communist Party. We barbarians from Asia Minor are hairy people. When we need a haircut, we need a haircut. It was so bad I had outgrown my only hat. I'm writing a very serious story, perhaps one of the most serious I shall ever write. That is why I am being flippant. Readers of Sherwood Anderson will begin to understand what I am saying after a while. They will know that my laughter is rather sad. I was a young man in need of a haircut, so I went down to 3rd Street, San Francisco, to the Barber College for a 15-cent haircut. 3rd Street, below Howard. Think of the Bowery in New York, Main Street in Los Angeles. Think of old men and boys out of work, hanging around, smoking Bull Durham, talking about the government, waiting for something to turn up, simply waiting. It was a Monday morning in August, and a lot of the tramps had come over to the shop to brighten up a bit. The Japanese boy who was working over the free chair had a waiting list of 11. All the other chairs were occupied. I sat down and began to wait. Outside, as Hemingway, The Sun Also Rises, Farewell to Arms, Death in the Afternoon, Winner Take Nothing, would say, haircuts were 4 bits. I had 20 cents and a half-pack of Bull Durham. I rolled a cigarette, handed the pack to one of my contemporaries, who looked in need of nicotine, and inhaled the dry smoke, thinking of America, what was going on politically, economically, and spiritually. He looked Iowa. My contemporary was a boy of 16. He looked Iowa, splendid potentially, a solid American, but down, greatly down in the mouth. Little sleep, no change of clothes for several days, a little fear, etc. I wanted very much to know his name. A writer is always wanting to get the reality of faces and figures. Iowa, I said, I just got in from Salinas. No work in the lettuce fields, going north now to Portland, try to ship out. I wanted to tell him how it was with me. Rejected story from Scribner's, rejected essay from the Yale Review, no money for decent cigarettes, worn shoes, old shirts, but I was afraid to make something of my own troubles. A writer's troubles are always boring, a bit unreal. people are apt to feel, well, who asked you to write in the first place? A man must pretend not to be a writer. I said, good luck, North. Iowa shook his head. I know better. Give it a try anyway. Nothing to lose. Fine boy. I hope he isn't dead. Hope he hasn't frozen. Mighty cold these days, December 1933. Hope he hasn't gone down. He deserved to live, Iowa. I hope you got work in Portland. I hope you're earning money. I hope you are eating regularly, walking along like a human being, being happy, Iowa. My good wishes are with you. I have said a number of prayers for you. All the same, I think he is dead by this time. It was in him the day that I saw him, the low, malicious face of the beast, and at the same time, all the theaters in America were showing over and over again an animated film cartoon in which there was a song, Who's Afraid of the Big Bad Wolf? And that's what it amounts to. People with money laughing at the death that is crawling slyly into boys like young Iowa, pretending that it isn't there, laughing in warm theaters. I have prayed for Iowa, and I consider myself a coward. By this time, he must be dead, and I am sitting in a small room talking about him, only talking. I began to watch the Japanese boy who was learning to become a barber. He was shaving an old tramp who had a horrible face, one of those faces that emerged from years and years of evasive living, years of being unsettled, of not belonging anywhere, of owning nothing. And the Japanese boy was holding his nose, his own nose, so that he would not smell the old tramp. A trivial point in the story, a bit of data with no place in a work of art. Nevertheless, I put it down. A young writer is always afraid of something significant, that some significant fact may escape him. He is always wanting to put everything he sees. I wanted to know the name of the Japanese boy. I am profoundly interested in names. I have found that those that are unknown are the most genuine. Take a big name like Andrew Mellon. I was watching the boy very closely. I wanted to understand from the way he was, keeping his sense of smell away from the mouth and nostrils of the old man, what he was thinking, how he was feeling. Years ago, when I was 17, I pruned vines in my uncle's vineyard north of Sanger in the San Joaquin Valley, and there were several Japanese working with me, Yoshio Enomoto, Hideo Suzuki, Katsumi Sujimoto, and one or two others. These Japanese taught me a few simple phrases. Hello, how are you? Fine day, isn't it? Goodbye, and so on. I said in Japanese to the barber student, how are you? He said in Japanese, very well, thank you. Then in English, do you speak Japanese? Have you lived in Japan? I said, unfortunately, no. I am able to speak only one or two words. I used to work with Yoshio Enomoto, Hideo Suzuki, Katsumi Sujimoto. Do you know them? He went on with his work, thinking of the names. He seemed to be whispering, Enomoto, Suzuki, Sujimoto. He said, Suzuki, small man? I said, yes. He said, I know him. He lives in San Jose now. He is married now. I want you to know that I am deeply interested in what people remember. A young writer goes out to places and talks to people. He tries to find out what they remember. I'm not using any great material for a short story. Nothing is going to happen in this work. I am not fabricating a fancy plot. I am not creating memorable characters. I'm not using a slick style of writing. I'm not building up a fine atmosphere. I have no desire to sell this story or any story to the Saturday Evening Post or to Cosmopolitan or to Harper's. I am not trying to compete with the great writers of short stories, men like Sinclair Lewis and Joseph Hersheimer and Zane Grey, men who really know how to write, how to make up stories that will sell. Rich men who understand all the rules about plot and character and style and atmosphere and all that stuff. I have no desire for fame. I am not out to win the Nobel the Pulitzer Prize, or the Nobel Prize, or any other prize. I am out here in the far west, in San Francisco, in a small room on Carl Street, writing a letter to common people, telling them in simple language things they already know. I am merely making a record, so if I wander around a little, it is because I am in no hurry and because I don't know the rules. If I have any desire at all, it is to show the brotherhood of man. This is a big statement, and it sounds a little precious. Generally, a man is ashamed to make such a statement. He's afraid sophisticated people will laugh at him. But I don't mind. I am asking sophisticated people to laugh. That is what sophistication is for. I don't believe in races. I don't believe in governments. I see life as one life at a time, so millions simultaneously all over the earth. Babies who have not yet been taught to speak any language are the only race of the world, the race of man. All the rest is pretense, what we call civilization. Hatred, fear, desire for strength. But a baby is a baby, and the way they cry, there you have the brotherhood of man, babies crying. We grow up and we learn the words of a language, and we see the universe through language, the language we know. We do not see it through all languages or through no language at all, through silence, for example. And we isolate ourselves in the language we know. All the eternal. Over here, we isolate ourselves in English, or American, as Mencken calls it. All the eternal things in our world, words. If I want to do anything, I want to speak a more universal language. The heart of man, the unwritten part of man, that which is eternal and common to all races. Now I am beginning to feel guilty and incompetent. I have used all this language, and I am beginning to feel that I have said nothing. This is what drives a young writer out of his head, this feeling that nothing is being said. Any ordinary journalist would have been able to put the whole business into a three-word caption. Man is man, he would have said it. Something clever with any number of implications. But I want to use language that will create a single implication. I want the meaning to be precise. And perhaps that is why the language is so imprecise. I am walking around my subject, the impression I want to make. I'm trying to see it from all angles so that I will have a whole picture, a picture of wholeness. It is the heart of man that I am trying to imply in this work. Let me try again. I hadn't had a haircut in a long time, and I was beginning to look seedy, so I went down to the barber college on 3rd Street, and I sat in a chair. I said, "Leave it full and back. I have a narrow head, and if you don't leave it full and back, I will go out of this place looking like a horse. Take as much as you'd like off the top. No lotion, no water, comb it dry." Reading makes a fool man. Writing a precise one, as you see. This is what happened. It doesn't make much of a story, and the reason is that I have left out the barber, the young man who gave me the haircut. He was tall. He had a serious face, thick lips, on the verge of smiling, but melancholy, thick lashes, sad eyes, a large nose. I saw his name on the card that was pasted on the mirror, Theodore Badal. A good name, a good young man, genuine. Theodore Badal began to work on my head. A good barber never speaks until he has been spoken to, no matter how full his heart may be. "That name," I said, "Badal. Are you an Armenian?" "I am an Armenian. I have mentioned this before. People look at me and begin to wonder, so I come right out and tell them, 'I am an Armenian,' I say. Or they read something I have written and begin to wonder, so I let them know, 'I am an Armenian,' I say. It is a meaningless remark, but they expect me to say it, so I do. I have no idea what it is like to be an Armenian, or what it is like to be an Englishman, or a Japanese, or anything else. I have a faint idea of what it is like to be alive. This is the only thing that interests me greatly. This and tennis. I hope someday to write a great philosophical work on tennis, something on the order of Death in the Afternoon, but I am aware that I am not yet ready to undertake such a work. I feel that the cultivation of tennis on a large scale among the peoples of the earth will do much to annihilate racial differences, prejudices, hatred, etc. Just as soon as I have perfected my drive and my lob, I hope to begin my outline, trying to make fun of Hemingway. I am not. Death in the Afternoon. I hope to begin my outline of this great work. It may seem to some sophisticated people that I am trying to make fun of Hemingway. I am not. Death in the Afternoon is a pretty sound piece of prose. I could never object to it as prose. I cannot even object to it as a philosophy. I think it is a finer philosophy than that of Will Durant and Walter Pitkin. Even when Hemingway is a fool, he is at least an accurate fool. He tells you what exactly takes place, and he doesn't allow the speed of an occurrence to make his exposition of it hasty. This is a lot. It is some sort of advancement for literature, to relate leisurely the nature and meaning of that which is very brief in duration. Are you an Armenian? I asked Badal. We are a small people, and whenever one of us meets another, it is an event. We are always looking around for someone to talk to in our language. Our most ambitious political party estimates that there are nearly 2 million living us on Earth, but most of us don't think so. Most of us sit down and take a pencil and a piece of paper, and we take one section of the world at a time and imagine how many Armenians, at most, are likely to be living in that section, and we put together the highest number on paper, and then we go on to another section. India, Russia, Soviet Armenia, Egypt, Italy, Germany, France, America, South America, Australia, and so on. And after we add up our most hopeful figures, the total comes to something a little less than 1 million. Then we start to think of how big our families are, how high our birth rate, and how low our death rate, except in times of war and massacres, increase the death rate. And we begin to imagine how rapidly we will increase if we are left alone a quarter of a century, and we feel pretty happy. We always leave out earthquakes, wars, massacres, famines, etc., and it is a mistake. I remember the Near East relief drives in my hometown. My uncle used to be our orator, and he used to make a whole auditorium full of Armenians weep. He was an attorney, and he was a great orator. Well, at first the trouble was war. Our people were being destroyed by the enemy. Those that hadn't been killed were homeless, and they were starving. Our own flesh and blood, my uncle said, and we all wept. And we gathered money and sent it to our people in the old country. Then after the war, when I was a bigger boy, we had another Near East relief drive, and my uncle stood on the stage of the civic auditorium of my hometown, and he said, "Thank God this time it is not the enemy, but an earthquake. God has made us suffer. We have worshipped him through trial and tribulation, through suffering and disease and torture and horror." And my uncle began to weep, began to sob, through the madness of despair. And now he has done this thing, and still we praise him, still we worship him. We do not understand the ways of God. And after the drive, I went up to my uncle and I said, "Did you mean what you said about God?" And he said, "That was oratory. We've got to raise money." "What God? It is nonsense." "And when you cried?" I asked. And my uncle said, "That was real. I could not help it. I had to cry. Why, for God's sake, why must we go through all this goddamn hell? What have we done to deserve all this torture? Man won't let us alone. God won't let us alone. Have we done something? Aren't we supposed to be pious people? What is our sin? I am sick and disgusted with God. I am sick of man. The only reason I am willing to get up and talk is that I don't dare keep my mouth shut. I can't bear the thought of more of our people dying. Jesus Christ, have we done something? I asked Theodore Badal if he was an Armenian. He said, I am an Assyrian. Well, it was something. They, the Assyrians, came from our part of the world. They had noses like our noses, eyes like our eyes, hearts like our hearts. They had a different language. When they spoke, we couldn't understand them, but they were a lot like us. It wasn't quite as pleasing as it would have been if Badal had been an Armenian, but it was something. I am an Armenian, I said. I used to know some Assyrian boys in my hometown. Joseph Sargis, Nido Elia, Tony Saleh. Do you know any of them? Joseph Sargis, I know him, said Badal. The others I do not know. We lived in New York until 5 years ago. Then we came out west to Turlock. Then we moved up to San Francisco. Nido Elia, I said, is the captain in the Salvation Army. I don't want anyone to imagine that I am making anything up or that I am trying to be funny. Tony Saleh, I said, was killed 8 years ago. He was riding a horse and he was thrown and the horse began to run. Tony couldn't get himself free. He was caught by a leg and the horse ran around and around for a half hour and then stopped. And when they went up to Tony, he was dead. He was 14 at the time. I used to go to school with him. Tony was a very clever boy, very good at arithmetic. We began to talk about the Assyrian language and the Armenian language, about the old world, conditions over there, and so on. I was getting a 15-cent haircut, and I was doing my best to learn something at the same time, to acquire some new truth, some new appreciation of the wonder of life, the dignity of man. Man has great dignity. Do not imagine that he has not. Badal said, I cannot read Assyrian. I was born in the old country, but I want to get over it. Why? I said. Why do you want to get over it? Well, he laughed, simply because everything is all washed up over there. I am repeating his words precisely, putting in nothing of my own. We were a great people once, he went on, but that was yesterday, the day before yesterday. Now we are a topic in ancient history. We had a great civilization. They're still admiring it. Now I am in America, learning how to cut hair. We are washed up as a race. We're through. It's all over. Why should I learn to read the language? We have no writers. We have no news. Well, there is a little news. Once in a while, the English encourage the Arabs to massacre us. That is all. It is an old story. We know all about it. The news comes over to us through the Associated Press, anyhow. These remarks were very painful to me, an Armenian. I had always felt badly about my own people being destroyed. I have never heard an Assyrian speaking in English about such things. I felt great love for this young fellow, don't get me wrong. There's a tendency to think in terms these days. I think now that I have affection for all people, even for the enemies of Armenia, whom I have so tactfully not named. Everyone knows who they are. I have nothing against any of them, because I think of them as one man living, one life at a time. And I am positive, that one man at a time is incapable of the monstrosities performed by mobs. My objection is to mobs only. Well, I said, it is much the same with us. We too are old. We still have our church. We still have a few writers, Aharonian, Isaacian, a few others, but it is much the same. Yes, said the barber, I know. We went in for the wrong things. We went in for the simple things, peace and quiet and families. We didn't go in for machinery and conquest and militarism. We didn't go in for diplomacy and deceit and the invention of machine guns and poison gases. Well, there's no use being disappointed. We had our day, I suppose. We are hopeful, I said. There is no Armenian living who does not still dream of an independent Armenia. Dream, said Badal. Well, that is something. Assyrians cannot even dream anymore. Why do you know? Well, why? Do you know how many of us are left on Earth? 2 or 3 million, I suggested. 70,000, said Badal. That is all. 70,000 Assyrians in the world, and the Arabs are still killing us. They killed 70 of us in a little uprising last month. There is a small paragraph in the paper. 70 more of us destroyed. We will be wiped out before long. My brother is married to an American girl, and he has a son. There is no more hope. We are trying to forget Assyria. My father still reads a paper that comes from New York, but he is an old man. He'll be dead soon. Then his voice changed. He ceased speaking as an Assyrian and began speaking to me as a barber. Have I taken enough off the top? He said. The rest of the story is pointless. I said so long to the young Assyrian and left the shop. I walked across town 4 miles to my room on Carl Street. I thought about the whole business, Assyria and this Assyrian, Theodore Badal, learning to be a barber, the sadness of his voice, the hopelessness of his attitude. This was months ago in August. But ever since I've been thinking about Assyria, and I've been wanting to say something about Theodore Badal, a son of an ancient race, himself youthful and alert, yet hopeless. 70,000 Assyrians, a mere 70,000 of that great people, and all the others quiet in death, and all the greatness crumbled and ignored, and a young man in America learning to be a barber, and a young man lamenting bitterly the course of history. Why don't I make up plots and write beautiful love stories that could be made into motion pictures? Why don't I let these unimportant and boring matters go hang? Why don't I try to please the American reading public? Well, I am an Armenian. Michael Arlen is an Armenian too. He's pleasing the public. I have a great admiration for him, and I think he has perfected a very fine style of writing and all that. But I don't want to write about the people he likes to write about. You take Iowa and the Japanese boy and Theodore Badal, the Assyrian. Well, they may go down physically like Iowa to death, or spiritually like Badal to death. But they are the stuff that is eternal in man. And it is this stuff that interests me. You don't find them in bright places, making witty remarks about sex and trivial remarks about art. You find them where I found them, and they'll be there forever. The race of man, the part of man, of Assyria as much as of England, that cannot be destroyed. The part that massacre does not destroy. The part that earthquake and war and famine and madness and everything else cannot destroy. This work is in tribute to Iowa, to Japan, to Assyria, to Armenia, to the race of man everywhere, to the dignity of that race, to the brotherhood of things alive. I am not expecting Paramount Pictures to film this work. I am thinking of 70,000 Assyrians, one at a time, alive, a great race. I am thinking of Theodore Badal, himself 70,000 Assyrians, and 70 million Assyrians, himself Assyria and man, standing in a barbershop in San Francisco in 1933, and being still himself the whole race. The end.